The mountains don't take men quickly. They take them slowly, piece by piece, until something in their eyes changes forever. Before Marty Meierotto vanished from television and retreated into silence, he recorded a final message, a warning about what mountain men truly face when the cameras shut off and the snow starts whispering. In it, he claims there are places in the wild where time folds, where footsteps echo without a second pair of boots. And once you see the truth, he says, the wilderness remembers you. Before we press play, subscribe for more dark stories hidden far from the road. When Marty Meierotto quietly stepped away from the spotlight, most fans assumed he wanted peace, a slower life, fewer cameras, more time with the wind. But those who knew him best noticed something different in the weeks before he disappeared from public view. He wasn't just tired, he was watchful, as if he expected something to step out of the tree line at any moment. For decades, Marty survived winters so brutal they sheared metal like stale leather. He knew how snow moved, how rivers breathed beneath ice, how wolves sounded when they circled. But during his final trapping season, his journal entries changed, the handwriting cramped, sentences cut short. Words like listening and waiting appeared repeatedly, not directed at predators, but the land itself. He began avoiding certain valleys, claiming the wind carried memories there. He stopped setting traps near old, hollow trees, saying, "You can hear breathing inside the wood." When younger trappers asked what he meant, he'd go silent, eyes fixed on nothing, like he was replaying a scene only he could see. Neighbors recall him boarding up windows, not to keep bears out, but to keep shadows from slipping in. He nailed iron nails upside down over the door frame, a superstition older than the state itself. His wood stove burned constantly, even in mild weather. He whispered to the flame. One visitor swore she heard him say, "Fire keeps them slow." When asked what them meant, Marty shut the stove door with shaking hands. A week before leaving television, he burned 3 seasons' worth of logbooks in a steel barrel behind his cabin. Pages curled, blackened, and disappeared in the breeze. When a friend tried to salvage one, Marty grabbed his wrist and hissed, "Tracks on paper lead things straight to you." No one asked again. Then, abruptly, he vanished from airports, hardware stores, and trappers' conventions. His cabin stopped smoking. Mail piled at the post office. Social media went silent. But inside his cabin, on a table dusted with ash, searchers found one sentence carved into wood. "I heard it call my name. Twice is too many." And beneath that, "Don't follow where snow falls uphill." Whatever Marty saw in the mountains didn't scare him into hiding. It taught him how to disappear. When the valleys freeze and the sun hangs low like a dull copper coin, most men hear nothing but their own heartbeat. But Marty claimed the silence itself had layers. The deeper he traveled into the backcountry, the more he felt something listening back. At first, it was harmless, faint echoes when he called out to let bears know he was near. Except the echoes didn't match. Sometimes they returned late, too late. Sometimes they came back slightly altered, with syllables he never spoke. Then the wind changed. Marty began writing about nights when snowflakes drifted sideways without breeze, like breath exhaled from unseen throats. He described walking across untouched powder, only to hear 2 sets of footsteps crunching behind him, slow, measured, never overlapping his own. When he'd whirl around, nothing stood there, just timberline shadows, swaying without wind. Most trappers know the sound of a wolf's panic call, but Marty heard a different cry, short, clipped, almost human. It came from ridges where no one lived, bounced between trees like a warning passed hand to hand. In his final journal, he described sleeping near the snow line and waking to a sensation like fingertips brushing the canvas of his tent. Not claws, not paws, fingers. He wrote, "They tap before they take." Psychologists call it wilderness paranoia, sensory deprivation. The brain invents patterns to survive, but Marty disagreed. He believed the silence was not an absence of sound, but a hunger, a vacuum waiting for vibration. memory, voice. He claimed if you listened long enough, the quiet would answer. And somewhere along that ridge, something finally did. Because his last note from that season was short, frantic, and smudged with thawed snow. The echo said my name. For most of his career, Marty kept records like a surgeon. Dates of sets, temperatures, animal behavior, trap yields, even changes in tree bark. His handwriting was a map of the wilderness itself. But during his final seasons, 3 whole logbooks went missing from his shelf. Just gone, vanished like tracks in meltwater. Friends noticed the change immediately. Marty stopped lending advice and started asking strange questions instead. Do you dream in the same place twice? Have you ever followed footprints that didn't start anywhere? One neighbor swears he saw Marty burning papers behind the cabin on a windless night. Not trash, not old bills. When the neighbor stepped closer, Marty shielded the barrel with his body and said one sentence: "Ink is bait." A week later, the ash pit was roped off with twine. Small, vertical claw marks scored the inside rim of the barrel, precise, evenly spaced, too consistent for any animal that belonged there. Searchers eventually found fragments of those missing logbooks deep in his drawer. Most pages were shredded, but on several of them, the ink had bled upward against gravity, like it had tried to crawl off the page. Temperatures, moon phases, and trap coordinates were crossed out with trembling strokes. On the back of one page, Marty carved a word with the tip of his knife: listening. Another page was slashed entirely through, but one line survived in the margin: tracks don't vanish, they're traded. When someone asked him why he stopped writing, Marty responded without looking up: because the mountain read enough. After that, every written record vanished from his cabin, except the walls. Those he carved coordinates into, and every coordinate led to a clearing where footprints walked in circles, until they didn't. Long before Marty burned his logbooks, he started paying attention to something ordinary men overlook: trees, not the trunks themselves, but the patterns carved into them. At first, he thought they were elk rubs, normal signs of rutting season, but these markings were too symmetrical, sometimes forming perfect triangles, each point drilled with a perfectly round puncture, as if by a tool no trapper carried. He began finding these symbols at the edge of ridges, always at the forest's hush line, where birdsong stops abruptly. The deeper he went, the more precise the carvings became. Some triangles pointed east, others west, but a handful pointed directly downhill into a valley he refused to name aloud. One evening, while checking distant trap lines, Marty noticed something impossible. A mark appeared freshly carved on a tree he'd passed only an hour earlier, still oozing sap like an open wound. The punctures were warm. Someone, or something, had beaten his return trip. He tested a theory. He pressed his ear against one of the holes. The bark vibrated, faintly, like breath behind a door. Marty stumbled back, nearly dropping his rifle. The next morning, he discovered a circle of trees where every trunk bore paired punctures, eye height, observing the clearing's center. Moss had grown in patches around them, forming shapes reminiscent of footprints, but stretched, elongated, unnatural. When a younger trapper asked what they meant, Marty pointed to the downward-facing marks carved along a fallen log. "Those aren't symbols," he said. "They're routes. Routes to where? No place a man returns from." That same week, his journal notes stopped describing animals entirely. Instead, he wrote about trees bending subtly uphill, their shadows leaning in sympathy toward a valley scarred with the same triangular marks. His final line on tree sign was short, jagged, carved into wood: "When the trees start pointing, don't follow." Because in the deep winter wilderness, it isn't the predator you see that takes you, it's the path that invites you. Even seasoned mountain men talk about predators like statistics: bears, wolves, lynx. You track their prints, measure their stride, read hunger in the depth of their impression. But Marty claimed there was something else on the mountain, something that counted you. It started with missing snare, not sprung, removed. The ground where they'd been set was perfectly smoothed over. No prints, no drag marks. Then bait strips went missing one piece at a time, as if something monitored how far Marty would track its theft. What unnerved him most were the numbers. He marked each missing snare with a chalk tally on the inside of his cabin door. But after the third week, the tallies began to disappear, slowly, like someone was erasing them, in reverse order. One chalk, every morning, rubbed from the door in a perfect vertical line. Snow around his traps began to show shallow depressions, too wide for boots, too soft for hooves. They appeared in sets of 14, then 13, then 12, counting down. The prince circled his sleeping tarp. On nights he camped out high country alone. He woke once to find 6 depressions near his head, evenly spaced like a clock. He wrote, "It's not hunting, it's waiting for a number." Marty began experimenting, placing his own tally rocks near his tent, arranged in rows. By morning, the bottom row was always removed, never the top, as if something invisible was wiping away his time. He confided to a close friend that one night he tried to stay awake and watch. But when he opened his eyes, dawn had already burned the frost gold. His tally rocks were reduced by 1, and a single stone sat on his chest. Ice cold, flat, smooth, like it had been inside water, deeper than any lake he knew. Locals dismissed it as sleepwalking, paranoia, cabin fever. But Marty insisted, down isn't direction, down is countdown. On his last week in the bush, he found only 1 depression in the snow outside his cabin. No tracks leading to it, none leaving, just 1. He packed early, left the traps empty, and never camped alone again. Because when something in the wild counts backward, you're the number it's waiting to reach. There's a place deep in the back country Marty never marked on any map. Not because he forgot it, but because he refused to give it shape on paper. He called it the Circle, though he never said why. The first time he found it, the forest felt wrong, quiet in a way silence shouldn't be. Even the wind skirted the treetops, refusing to drop. In a clearing no wider than a cabin's footprint, 12 rusted traps sat arranged in a perfect ring, jaws open, teeth glinting softly. Not modern traps, these were old, iron-forged, hand-hammered by men long dead. The snow hadn't drifted inside the circle, as if something breathed gently from below. Each trap was connected with frayed rope, and every rope angle pointed inward, like tethers around an invisible animal. But the worst part wasn't the traps. It was the chairs. Around the ring, Marty counted 9 seats made from shed antlers, lashed together with sinew, bleached by winter sun. Each seat faced the circle's center, as if watchers once sat there in tribute. Some antlers had tiny notches carved into them, tallies marking who knows how many nights spent in vigil. In front of each chair lay a shallow dish filled with black ash. He crouched to examine one dish and noticed something impossible. Faint heat still radiated from the ash. Not warm from sun, warm from flame. Someone had been here recently. He backed away, rifle raised. No tracks in or out, no footprints around the chairs. Only a single disturbance, shallow impressions between the traps. Small, narrow, delicate. Like a child's bare feet had danced between the jaws without ever touching metal. When he returned weeks later, 5 chairs were gone. The traps sat wider. The ash bowls were fuller. Then came the moment that never left his voice. One midnight, while camped miles away, he woke to the sound of metal jaws clacking shut. 12 times, one after another, echoing through the valley. The echoes didn't fade. They looped, bouncing between ridges like a chant. At dawn, he sprinted back to the clearing. All 12 traps sat closed. Something had occupied the center, and on one antler seat, a new notch was carved. Marty fled so fast he left his own tracks unburied. He refused to speak of the circle again, except once, whispering, "It's not a trap for animals. It's a witness stand. Whatever sits in the center isn't caught. It's judged." Marty's cabin overlooked a narrow ridge most hunters avoided, not because of danger, but because of echo. Sound behaved wrong there. It didn't travel outward like a normal valley bell. It bent, folding back toward the listener. Old-timers said the ridge kept secrets in its teeth. During his final seasons, Marty woke often to muffled conversation from behind that ridge. Not words, cadence, a low murmur, human enough to freeze muscle, too distant to decode. When he leaned out the window, the sound snapped off instantly, as if it sensed exposure. He tried to record it once. The tape came back blank, not static, blank. The recorder captured his breathing, the click of buttons, even the cabin rustling. But when the voices should have peaked, the waveform flattened like someone pressed a finger over the microphone. The next morning, his recorder sat outside on the porch rail where he hadn't left it, balanced perfectly, lens pointed at the ridge. That night, the murmurs returned, closer, like several people whispering their own names, overlapping, swallowed by the dark. Marty never admitted fear easily, but his journal entry read, "They sound like men practicing being human." One evening, the murmurs shifted pitch, becoming almost panicked. Drawn by instinct, Marty crept outside and saw lantern-like glows weaving behind the tree line, soft, pale, swaying like signal. When he stepped forward, every glow extinguished simultaneously. No footsteps retreated, no branches snapped, only silence. A silence too sudden to be natural. The next morning, he found 3 perfect circles burned into the pine needles above the ridge, small and shallow, like something hot hovered there briefly. No soot, no scorch marks on the trunks. He measured the radius. Each circle was precisely the same. Later, he carved a note on his doorframe. "The mountain doesn't guard us from what's out there. It guards what's out there from us." After that night, Marty slept with his boots on. Because when whispers start practicing, footsteps usually follow. Late in his final season, Marty started reporting something he'd never confessed before, citing a figure at the tree line. Not a bear, not a hunter, something that watched. It always stood just far enough away that branches obscured its shape, shoulders too narrow, head tilted slightly, listening more than looking. He first spotted it during a mild snowstorm. Snow fell at a slant, fog curling low. Through the blur, a silhouette leaned against a spruce trunk, hands flat against the bark. It didn't shiver, didn't brace against the cold. It only cocked its head when Marty raised his rifle. Like a deer hearing a branch break, he shouted. The figure didn't run. It moved sideways through the timber, without showing steps, fading between trunks as though the forest's shadows took turns wearing its outline. After that, the sightings continued, always at dawn or dusk. Sometimes at the left corner of his cabin window reflection, sometimes between the racks of drying pelts. Once, impossibly, halfway down an avalanche chute where no human could stand without sinking. What tore at him were the hands. They were always braced against bark, fingers long, spread wide, like it was reading tree grain for stories. One night, Marty approached the tree where the figure had stood hours earlier. 5 indentations marred the bark, too deep for fingertips, not deep enough for claws. The wood smelled oddly sweet, like sap forced to bloom early. He set traps facing the tree line. The next morning, every trap was sprung, but empty. The metal jaws glistened with droplets of melted frost and something oily, iridescent, like tear film. He tried confronting it once, lantern raised, eyes sharp, voice steady. He crossed 50 yards of dead, silent snow, and the figure stepped backward into the timber without breaking eye contact. No crunch of snow, no displaced powder, just gone. When he returned to his cabin, he found handprints on his window, too tall for him, fingers resting on the glass like someone whispering through bone. His last journal entry about the figure read, "It doesn't stalk, it studies. And if it ever moves forward, we're already too late." After that night, Marty refused to look toward the tree line again. Because in the high country, when something finally decides to close distance, it doesn't warn twice. In his last recorded interview, Marty sat forward in his chair, voice thinner than fans remembered. The host expected stories about cold winters, close calls, and grisly scars. Instead, Marty spoke quietly about patterns. Mountain men die wrong, he said. Not violently, precisely. He described disappearances where no tracks led into the woods, only out. Cabins found with food warm, rifles untouched, doors still bolted from the inside, campsites frozen mid-gesture, like the men had simply stood up and walked into the timber. Then he leaned closer to the microphone. "It don't take you all at once. It trims you, like a trapper working a pelt." He listed old friends whose minds collapsed after solitary seasons. Men who refused to sleep indoors. Others who woke screaming at tree bark patterns, unable to explain why. Some developed an obsession with circle, arranging stones and rope, pacing until frost lines matched some unseen geometry. Marty's hand trembled as he revealed a truth he'd never said publicly. "We're not the top of the food chain out there. We're the crop." He detailed rumors passed through generations of trappers, an unseen intelligence that thins the herd when numbers grow too confident. It does not kill, it collects. Tracks vanish, because the ground cooperates. Voices echo because they're learning tone. Forest line watchers mimic posture, waiting until men forget what stillness means. When asked why he was speaking now, Marty answered, "When mountain men stop fearing the woods come looking." His final breath was spent on words his nurse couldn't forget. "There ain't enough of us left to confuse 'em anymore." After his passing, the search and rescue registry quietly showed a spike in missing hunters. Solitary types, long-season campers, men with notebooks full of coordinates. Officials blamed weather, alcohol, hypothermia, but one entry chilled everyone who read it. Victim found circles burned into snow around camp. No prints inside. Marty was right about one thing. The mountain doesn't lose people, it calls them in. And someday, when the counting reaches 0, it won't let any of us walk back out.